welcome to another Coffee with Samso. We're at the Mill Pine Bookshop Cafe here in South Perth again, and today we're talking Canadian geology again. We're talking to Warren Potma, who's the exploration manager for Matador Mining, who has a very interesting project in Canada. We've already had a similar conversation a few months ago of where they're going, and this will probably be a fantastic way to update where they're going with things. So Warren, maybe just give us a good intro about yourself and let's hear the story.
Okay, Noel, yeah, it's good to chat with you for the first time. Look, my background, I'm a structural geologist. I spent best part of 25 years in the industry. Started out with Anglo Gold back in the early days, Sunrise Dam and the Eastern Goldfields in the heyday. 8 years with CSIRO in exploration and mining R&D, applied out into industry across a whole bunch of different exploration technologies. Then following that, I spent time exploration manager for a couple of juniors, and the last 5 years as a principal geologist with CSA Global before coming across to Matador to take on this new role.
Okay. Obviously, Matador being in where they are, Newfoundland, and the geology, is it, in your opinion, is it very similar or dissimilar to what you see, we used to in the goldfields?
Yeah. So look, the weathering regime, the topography, the weather is completely different to what we see in the goldfields, as you can understand. You know, Newfoundland is pretty stark, pretty cold, pretty windy, pretty wet place. There's not a weathered rock to be seen anywhere. The project is basically fresh rock, with a layer, thankfully a fairly thin layer of glacial till cover, and then organic matter on the surface and water everywhere. So it's very different to what I'm used to. You're not bashing through the desert, dealing with laterites and 100 metre deep weathering profiles and 200 metre deep cover sequences. It's a very different scene. But the mineral systems themselves are quite similar. So we're dealing with structurally controlled orogenic gold systems, nice high-grade vein systems, stockworks. We have the same granites, we have the same greenstones, albeit they're a lot younger. This is all Appalachian geology, so Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian type rocks. But they are the same rocks in a different setting. So we can take the technologies, the approaches that we use to exploration that we're very used to using in Australia and apply them maybe in a slightly different way in Canada. And I think that's part of our edge is coming from Australia. The Canadians, they really know how to explore in Canada, and they've got the systems down pat for the way that they approach things. We approach things slightly differently, so we can take everything that they know and apply that in the same way, but we can bring that additional bit of knowledge and maybe a slightly different approach that we use in Australia to the projects as well, to open up new search spaces.
One of the things that I took note when I first spoke to Matador, just out of COVID, in fact, they were my first conversation after COVID, is the large strike length that you have. It's common in Canada, in North America, but it's not common here to this degree. I think the only person that I can think of going back 20, 30 years is probably Gold Road, who took up effectively the whole greenstone belt there, the Yamana belt, I believe. So tell us how would you go about, because you're talking large kilometers, and make it even worse, it seems that everywhere you go you're getting good mineralization. So it's not like you got a barren spot and there's a good negative, right?
It's a handy problem to have, though.
Yes,
to have such a large area of ground, to have so much smoke, so much mineralisation along the strike length. And the thing that's really unique about this project is that the vast majority of that strike length has never been effectively explored. Okay, so for me, effective exploration is all about seeing what's going on in the basement. It's not just about sampling the transported cover and finding anomalies. The project is 120 kilometres of strike length. All of our existing resources, we've got 830,000 ounces at 2 grams. It's all very, very close to surface. Most of that's within 100 metres of surface. One of the pits shells goes down, maybe 200 metres. So it's all eminently open pittable, but it's all been discovered from outcropping mineralisation. And on this project, maybe 5 to 10% of the project area is outcropping. Whereas, if you think about the Yilgarn, a project like this, even the Yamana Belt, when Gold Road got in there before they made the Gruyere discovery, it was still peppered with drill holes. A lot of that had been drilled. It hadn't necessarily been effectively drilled, but it had been drilled. This project at the Cape Ray Shear, we've got that central 15 kilometres or so where we've got our series of resources. Those targets have been drilled where they outcrop, but away from those, you get more than 50 to 100 metres away from those targets, there's no drill holes into them either. Once you get outside that 15 kilometres, we've got 105 kilometres of strike length, 20 drill holes. That's it. It just has not been drilled. And it all sits under this sort of thin veneer, 0.5 metre to 5 metres in most cases, of transported glacial till cover. That's been sampled historically over the last 20, 30 years by the Canadians. There are anomalies everywhere. There's gold rock chips up to 191 grams per tonne that have never really been drill tested. We have now 33 new targets that we've identified from the historic data before we even collect any new data in the regional area. They're supported by multi-element geochemistry. We've got reasonable magnetics, which gives us this understanding of where the structures are. The main mineralised structure runs right up the full length of the tenement package. If you go northeast of us to Marathon Resources, they've got 4 million ounces on this structure, 50 kilometres northeast. So it's a proven multi-million ounce belt, and we've had next to no drilling outside of the main resources.
Being structurally controlled, is that going to be your friend? Because you're talking about so much kilometres.
Yeah, look, it really is. As a structural geologist, for me, I like to understand the structures that are hosting the mineralisation so we can predict where we want to be drilling. So we use a combination of the magnetics to pick the larger scale structures, and we're going down and doing now ground magnetics at close spacing so we can pick the finer scale structures and the finer detail. We combine that with the geochemistry. All of the mineralisation there has a lovely halo. There's about 8 or 9 really strong pathfinder elements. So these are elements that we can test with basic geochemistry to say whether we're getting closer to or further away from the mineralisation. Where we have outcrop, we can map, and we can use other geophysical methods to really focus the drilling before we put the diamond rigs on the ground.
And I guess, with so much acreage, are you starting to look to employ, slightly more sophisticated methods of exploring, like, the Superman kind of stuff?
Yeah, I don't know about Superman kind of stuff, but there's a lot of new technologies that have come, to the fore in the last 10 or 15 years. I mean, a lot of them came out of CSIRO when I was working there. Really good work on spectral mineralogy, instruments just like these cameras that you can basically just point at rocks at the drill core, and it collects the signature of the minerals, and it can tell you about the minerals in the core, and we can use that to understand the alteration and the mineralisation. It's cheap, it's quick, it's easy. It's not commonly done in Canada, particularly not by the juniors. There are a few leading companies over there doing it, but it's not common practice like it is in Australia. The geochemistry as well, the Canadians have typically focused, and I'm generalising here, but they're very, very good at exploring through the till, because the till's really difficult. When it's deep, it's almost impossible to see through. And they have geochemical techniques that help them to explore through sampling the till to estimate what may be going on underneath. But we're lucky at Cape Ray, that till is only 5 metres deep. We can get, and we're doing this, we've purchased person-portable backpack drill rigs. We basically cut through the till, and we can get a piece of diamond core at the bottom of hole, 10 centimetres of 2.5 centimetre diameter core, fresh rock at the bottom of hole to measure the signature of the mineralisation at basement. Now, you can't do that across most of Canada because the till's too deep, but where we are, we're lucky it's shallow. So we're using these backpack rigs like you'd use a RAB air core rig in the Yilgarn. Cheap, quick, cover a lot of ground, and give you a real indication of what's going on at the basement before you drop the diamond rig in there and do the expensive drilling.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, actually. Now that you've sort of mentioned that, it is actually a very cheap way of trying to get to basement. In the old days, when I had a different hat on, we would drill the basement, right? And then try and get that in a lot of the sort of fluff that went over in the goldfields was that they didn't hit basement, and and they were sampling non sort of regular stuff. Whereas I guess you see fresh rock, you can't go too far wrong, and you got a core, right? You're not dealing with chips, you're not dealing with mud and stuff like that.
No, that's right.
Look, when after the first conversation I had with you guys, that you guys put out a scoping study on I think it's on Cape Ray, right?
Yeah.
How's that going?
So the reason for doing that scoping study was to really understand, are there any fatal flaws with this project, right? So you'd be aware that more recently we've had a complete board change. Ian Murray's come on recently from Gold Road, taking them from,
he's everywhere at the moment.
He's everywhere, isn't he? But look, he's fantastic. He's on as our executive chairman. He understands exploration. And so he's come on board and basically said, you know what, our aim is to grow the resources through discovery, not just incrementally grow them through expanding. So the scoping study, what it did for us is it said, look, the metallurgy is straightforward, the recoveries are good, the payback is excellent, the grades are reasonably good, but at the moment, we all understand our resources are a bit small, okay? You're not going to start a project somewhere like Cape Ray off the back of 830,000 ounces of resources, even though they are at 2 grams and near surface. I mean, mineralisation is basically from the surface. This all looks fantastic, but for a company, and remember then, so we have Ian. Ian's brought in Justin Osborne. Also, he's an executive director over at Gold Road. He's an explorer I've worked with for many years. We get along really well, but more importantly, he really knows what he's doing. Ian and Justin are absolutely focused on discovery. So for us, it's about taking our existing resources, looking at this massive area that's never been properly explored undercover, making the new discoveries to get ourselves at least a 10-year mine life, producing at least 100,000 ounces a year. So for that, we're looking at realistically global resources 1.5 to 2 million ounces to give ourselves 1 million ounces mineable to kick the project off. So with that in mind, our focus is let's get out there and make the most of basically 120 kilometres, but certainly 105 kilometres that's never been properly explored, never drilled to basement, heaps of smoke everywhere with the surface geochemistry, lots of gold in rock chips up and down the length of the project, and never been tested with the drill bit. So our aim for this coming season, and realistically it's going to take us 2 years to test the number of targets that we've got. In this coming year, 12 targets tested, the highest priority. First pass with the backpack auger rig that I was talking about, and detailed magnetics, targeting the diamond drilling next year, so that we've actually got a whole bunch of targets tested, leading into hopefully what will be the company making discovery. This is a great district. There's a lot of gold around, and it's just never been properly tested.
Recently, you guys announced that you've had a new sort of discovery, a new project, prospect, or however you describe that. I think it's called Angus, is that right? Just share with us, how significant is that? Obviously, we talked about that you've got so much acreage, so much smoke. And then when I look at the stuff, and please correct me, it looked like, oh, that's another one. To me it was, oh, that's another bit of smoke. Is that, and obviously let us know what's the significance of that?
So firstly, Angus is the first new discovery on the project in more than 20 years. Okay, so all of the other resources were discovered more than 20 years ago, and then they've just been peppered without really stepping out. As I said, when I joined, Ian said to me, look, sure, we're going to incrementally grow those resources where there's low-hanging fruit, and we've done some extensional drilling this year, and that's been successful in drilling more mineralisation outside the existing resource wireframes at Window Glass Hill. The Window Glass Hill deposit is about 260, I think it is, 1,000 ounces of gold at just under 2 grams. It's hosted within a granite, the Window Glass Hill granite. It sits on the northeastern end of this granite. It's more than 2 kilometres long. And it's a very different mineralisation style to the central zone, which hosts the majority of our resources, 500,000 ounces of resources, which is a steeply dipping shear zone with high-grade veins as plunging chutes within that shear zone. The Window Glass Hill granite is a granite that hosts a stockwork of veins. The main mineralised veins are a flat vein set, nice high grade, but quite a gap between them. All open pittable potentially. Nice grades, but it's hosted within the granite and it's brittle and it's multiple horizons of mineralisation. When I joined, there was a wealth of data that really hadn't been explored yet because for the last 2 years, Matador had so much low-hanging fruit, they were just drilling the known targets and expanding basically Window Glass Hill. I went back and looked at that historic data and found the signature that we see for Window Glass Hill resource was basically repeated down at Angus. We had some historic IP, geophysics data, we had broad space magnetics, surface rock chip geochemistry. We went back in and did detailed magnetics and found the same signature at the detailed scale, which gave us the Angus target, and we drilled it. It's a kilometre away from Window Glass Hill. It was the first new target drilled on the project for a very long time, and certainly the first new discovery. And within those first 6 or 8 holes that we returned, we ended up with the discovery intersection, I guess, was 20 metres at it was at 2.38, I think, grams. But within that, more importantly, there was 9 metres at 5 grams. Okay, the holes around it, we're getting, as you were saying, smoke. We're getting broad intervals, 10, 20, 30 metres at 0.5, 0.3, 0.6, with grammars and 2 grammars within that. That's very different to what we see at Central Zone, and it's even somewhat different to what we saw at Window Glass Hill. What we see at Angus is we've got a true stockwork. There's at least 3 different vein sets, and they're bulking out intense alteration, a moderate amount of sulfides, and plenty of low-grade gold over a big area. We then stepped out 300 metres east of the discovery hole, and this was our latest announcement a couple of weeks ago. We drilled a fence of 3 lines there, and again we got another 20 gram metre intersection. So that's like saying I've got 20 metres at a gram. I mean, it wasn't 20 metres a gram. It was a broader zone of lower grade than that. But practically speaking, that's a significantly broad zone of mineralisation that says this system is physically big. Now we've got to find the sweet spots.
It's interesting. I think I want viewers to catch on this point here. Is that they stepped out 300 metres and got mineralisation. A lot of stuff that we see out there, when you step out 50 metres, you actually might miss something. So you're stepping out 300 metres and still finding the system. Sort of tells me that you have a fairly decent size cooking pot.
You have a decent sized system, but the other thing is it tells you, or tells me at least, that the exploration targeting approach that we're using, the indicators that we're using are working. Right? So, there's been, if you think about the guys working along strike, Newfound Gold, they're on a slightly different structure. They've had some phenomenal hits, but when you look closely, it's really narrow, high grade, or at least the holes are drilled very close together. Okay? That's really not our approach. Our approach is we're out there looking for something new. So more recently, Newfound Gold has had a hole they've stepped out 50 metres and had success. Fantastic. That's really great news for the industry. But all of our holes are at least 50 to 80 metres apart. We're looking for a big system. And in Window Glass Hill, we've found the breadth of the system, and now we're just working on understanding what's controlling the high grade so that we can find the high grade sweeteners within a big system that is eminently of a style that would be open pittable. I liken Window Glass Hill and Central Zone, which is, we see the granite, we've got the shear zone wrapping around the granite. The Central Zone mineralisation is in the sheared sediments and volcanics to the north of the granite. Then you have the stockwork at Window Glass Hill and the stockwork at Angus. I liken that to back in my day, what was known as the Tarmula gold mine, and is now known as King of the Hills, where you've got stockwork hosted gold in the granite, and then shear hosted and vein hosted mineralisation in the highly strained rocks around the edge. It's exactly the same geological setting. It's just a hell of a lot younger in Canada.
I know it's as you're talking about the width and the size and everything, it kind of reminds me of the hot chili story, where they're so big and they're stepping out hundreds of meters and hitting the grade, and they talk about this high grade core that's 500 meters wide, and then you hear stories like Boda that they drilled 15 metres away from the high grade intercept and they couldn't find it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a significant point in what what you guys have, is that you're seeing the size and you're sort of proving or realising the size, I suppose you could say that.
Yeah.
And one of the things I noticed in your drill sections is that, they're not very deep holes. They're 200 metres, I think it was. Yeah. And you're getting mineralisation. But one of the things I want to know is in your in Canada, when you see a lot of these things, they're very deep holes and they're very high grade. Whereas are you anticipating the grade changing as you go deep? Is the geology showing that, or are you just going to have this massive volume?
I think it's too early to tell at the moment. We haven't drilled any deep holes, and quite frankly, there's enough gold close to surface that we're just going to focus on that for the time being. Yeah. Certainly it would be lovely to see a Gwalia type shoot that goes forever at beautiful grades, but deep high grade things are hard work. And they take a lot to establish.
Not for the investors, though. We love this kind of things.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, if you can get a good open pit running at 1.5 grams from surface, and you get a million ounces in one of those, they'll make a hell of a lot of money.
I know. Yeah, I get that, yeah.
And so, for us to get the resources close to surface to start with, establish ourselves in the district, and then go chasing the big, hairy, audacious goals maybe is the way to go. But there's just so much opportunity close to surface at the moment. You'd be crazy drilling kilometre deep holes when we can get great intersections in 100-metre deep holes.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, being realistic, a low-grade, high-volume scenario can be very simple in terms of making money. Chasing those high-grade stuff is, it just complicates life, I think, in many ways.
That said, the grades are not that bad, even close to surface. So the scoping study that was done, showed that we were putting head grades through the mill over the first few years of 2.6, 2.8 grams per tonne, right? So that's pretty good for an open pit.
Yeah.
And again, it's a relatively simple milling circuit. Like I said, the rocks it's fresh rock from surface. We don't have to deal with clays. We don't have to deal with oxide. We don't have to deal with overburden. There's not a lot of strip to get into the mineralisation. So it's got a lot going for it.
So obviously the scoping study has highlighted that there's no nasties and milling's going to be not a problem. The payback period's really quite good,
really quick,
and 800 ounces there is just a tip of the iceberg, I guess. In terms of going forward, like you briefly mentioned what you guys are going to be doing, for the next 12 months, 24 months. Again, people need to understand that you're in Canada and there's things such as very cold weather and things like that, and things don't work in cold weather. What's your...
Interestingly enough, the Canadians work really well in cold weather. I don't work so well in cold weather, but the local geos and look, our entire team is based on the islands, so we have no real restrictions from COVID, except that I haven't been able to get to the project yet this year. That'll change next year. We've talked to the Canadian government, and there are processes in place where we can get over there and we can get on the ground and start to drive things more from a technical side of things. But look, next year, as I said, we've identified 33 high-level targets. We've identified within that 12 priority targets. We've already tested 2 of them. That was the Angus discovery and that fencer drilling that was 300 metres east. The reality is, now that we've looked at the core from both of those, that's one system. That's not 2 targets, that's become one larger target. We've also drilled but not got results back yet for another exploration target that was about 500-600 metres southwest of our Isle of Mort resource. This is, again, another complete step out using a combination of magnetics and geochemistry to target the main structure away from a known resource. We're waiting for results on that. We'll see how that goes. But so far, we've got assays back for 38 drill holes. Of those 38 drill holes, 10 of those holes have gone better than 10 gram metres. Now, when you think about that, as a greenfields exploration project, to say 25% of my drilling into new areas has come back with better than 10 gram metres is phenomenal. I would have given my eye teeth to that any day of the week when I was exploring in the Yilgarn. It just doesn't happen. And then if you add to that the prospectivity and the lack of drilling across 105 kilometres of strike length, which, as we said, has got geochem and surface gold rock chip smoke up and down it. We've got a 4 million ounce gold deposit 50 kilometres off the northeast end of our tenement, and there's just no work being done. I'm like a kid in a candy store, really, when it comes to the exploration potential here. And now that we've got the tools with the backpack drill rig and the power auger and a ground mag unit that we use, we're using spectral mineralogy and total digest multi-element geochemistry. These are all techniques that, for me, are bread and butter. But they haven't been applied to the project before. And so now we're going to be able to see through this cover, tackle these targets and hopefully come up with a company making discovery that gets us to that 1.5, 2 million ounces as quickly as possible.
Yeah, normally at this stage I sort of ask, people to talk about how do they, why buy your stock and things like that. I think you've answered that in terms of a technical point of view. The optimism of that, because I think that's the key. I like viewers to just understand what the numbers mean and what the geology means, because you're investing into an exploration company. You need to get a grasp of what it means. You're mineralized from the surface. You're seeing kilometers of strike of continuous mineralization. As you said, 10 gram meters is significant. Then 1 gram is not a lot, but that tells you have a system as opposed to no system.
That's right.
And that's the key. Look, in terms of any sort of deal breakers, do you see any from a technical point of view? And I know that that's a crystal ball kind of thing, but...
Yeah, well, look, I mean, before I joined Matador, I did my own due diligence, right? I looked at the board. We've got a board that would be right at home in a reasonably large mid-cap company, right? And they are absolutely focused on exploration. So no deal breaker. As an exploration manager there, I'm going to get funded, and I'm funded to do real exploration, not just poke in director's specials.
That's very important.
Not just poke director's specials into the ground to get the share price up. We're really well funded, so we've been completely funded, obviously, for the current season. We're fully funded for the next field season. Great project. Great opportunities. It's not like turning up to being handed a project that's already been drilled like a Swiss cheese and being expected to find something new. The fact is, this is blue sky. It's not even greenfields. A lot of it is just, we know we've got a mineralised trend. It's just a matter of systematically going out there and assessing it. And to have the board and the company backing the investment in that greenfields exploration, I think is critical. In terms of other questions that people might ask, First Nations in Canada is potentially considered an impediment to developing a project in the same way that it can be an impediment here. Look, we've got really great relationship with the First Nations groups that are on the island, but it's important to know that there are no resident First Nation groups on the island. So what it means is that we're not dealing with the First Nations with a right of veto. We're dealing with them as a stakeholder, as we would with any other stakeholder on the island. So that risk, I guess the market may see it as. I think if you do your job right, it's not really a risk. But regardless, that risk doesn't exist on Newfoundland. In terms of the weather, at the moment, we're operating through summer. We use the period between January and March to pull together all of the results, and then we get going again in April, which we will next year with drilling. But there's always the opportunity, once you get onto something, that you can just work all year round. So that's not really a limitation either, even though we Australians think, what would you want to work in minus 20 degrees and snow for?
It's supposed to 45 degrees.
The Canadians are as happy there as we are in 45 degrees, exactly.
Yeah, I think, there's so much mining activities and all the other activities in Canada, North America. It's not something new. The First Nation issues is a bit about ticking the boxes and doing the right thing by everybody, which everybody does anyway. The mining industry gets a bad rap for these kind of things, I find.
You've just got to treat people like people. Right,
which we do.
Exactly, and most do, right? And that's the thing. It's just the odd occasion where people forget that people are people. And that really is where we fall down. But for the most part, we're all striving to do the right thing by everybody.
Look, Warren, fantastic sharing. I really appreciate you giving us time. I think I wanted you to share the optimism or the reasons behind the optimisms, and I think that's come through. Look, viewers, feel free to send us messages or comments. Warren will, I'm sure, be happy to share. A lot of you guys have been doing it for the past few videos, which is just fantastic. Other than that, continue to give the thumbs up and subscribe to the Samso media. Warren, any last words? Sell your soul, get everyone to buy, and keep your job.
I've only just got my job. I hope I can keep it for a little longer. No, look, I mean, really, we've been flat out this year. I was only just joined the company in August. It's been a bit of a roller coaster ride with COVID and everything else that's been going on. We've still got a lot of news to come between now and January. We've reported only half of the drilling that we've done so far. We've still got core in the core shed being processed. So there's another 5,000 metres or so worth of drilling to be reported between now and early next year. And then next year, really this year has all been about setting ourselves up for the discovery next year, hitting those new targets and hopefully seeing the share price fly.
Fantastic. Again, thank you, Warren, and appreciate it, and hopefully we can continue to hear the journey.
Thanks very much for your time, Noel. I appreciate it.
Okay.